Greetings to this edition of the Nonprofit Exchange. Each week, we review techniques, strategies, skills, culture development. We review all those things that are missing in the organizations that we lead. And we bring in people who are successful in business, and they share their business strategies, their business skills, their framework for what they do. And they have a specific area of expertise. So Russell and I co-host this each week, and we encourage leaders and charities of all kinds to install sound business principles into the organization that they lead. So Russell, welcome.
Happy Tuesday. Welcome again, everybody. It's good to be here. Thank you, Juliet, for joining us. It's a beautiful sunny day in Denver, Colorado, and we're finally north of 30 degrees.
Oh my, I'm in Virginia, the south central part of Virginia, and we're in the mid 60s. It's top down weather from the convertible. And our guest today, as you already let out of the bag, is Juliet Clark. And Juliet, where are you coming in from?
I am coming in from Draper, Utah, where we actually broke 30 today as well. It's sunny, the snow is thawing, but more snow tomorrow from what I hear. So
your company is Superband Publishing, but there's also this Winsome Media Group, and I'll let you talk about your background. Basically, what's the background that's given you the expertise to talk about what you're going to talk about today? The title of what we're talking about is how community building and assessment marketing helped you build relationships. And at the bottom of leadership, at the bottom of communication, at the bottom of attracting funding would be relationships. So Juliet, welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you for having me on, Russell and Hugh. I actually started out in the traditional publishing world and went on to advertising, worked at Day on the Nissan account, and then moved on to Mattel to work on some of their products. And around 2008, I decided to write my first book. And I thought it would be a no-brainer getting it published. Self-publishing was brand new. And I went out and took my fiction novel, which, by the way, I'll tell you guys a little secret. I was going through a divorce. And I wrote a mystery novel and I killed my ex-husband. So I was very anxious to get that published, because it was either that or wear felony orange for the rest of my life. And, you know, I am blonde, so not my color. So to move on from there, I published my first book, and I found a lot of inadequacies in the self-publishing world, things that I thought were super unethical. And I created my own publishing company. So that's where my expertise began. And by my third book, I had built my own platform and sold over 25,000 copies of that one. I was out of family members to kill, so that sold a lot more than my previous novels. And so I moved on from there. And after that happened, my friends came and wanted me to help them build their platforms. And the company just morphed throughout the years. We were noticing entrepreneurs were writing books. And when they brought them to us, we got a sense right away that this was not going to be the breakthrough product that the writing coaches had told them it would be. It was probably going to be another in a long line of failed products because they didn't have a platform. So that's where we are today. We have Winsome Media Group, where we focus primarily on building platforms for companies, coaches, authors, speakers, small businesses. And Superbrand Publishing, where if you are really, really serious about that book needs to be a bestseller, we go back and we build ROI on those failed products and services that you've had in the past, and position that book as the icing on the cake instead of the main event. So we're kind of a fix-it crew that goes back and fixes all that other stuff that wasn't done correctly and starts bringing ROI into your business. So if I had to sum it up, I would say we are a marketing company disguised as a publishing company for the most part.
Well, that's key. And to wrap around the relevance for the charities is that we don't know how to build this engagement model that you're talking about that is so important in building relationships. Before I go farther, would you describe what you mean by platform?
Yes, so a platform is where you build your audience, your fan base. And in the fiction world, it was a little bit harder because you had characters that you had to build that around. In the nonfiction world, it is building those people who are engaged in your business. And so I think there's a big gap out there between the digital world and the old networking ways that we used to work. And there are people who are my age, you know, probably 45 and older, not that I'm 45, but I will just pretend I'm down there, that they are really experts at being able to build relationships one-on-one. That's what we grew up with. But they don't know how to bring in that digital space that they need. So we teach them how to build relationships online because you can't sell online unless you have relationships built. People don't know you, like you, and trust you. Then we have this other group out here who are the younger generation who are really invested in that digital platform, but they're not really great at building one-on-one relationships the way our generation is. So we bring all of that together. We combine that personal and that digital to actually build relationships with people before you sell to them online.
That's really amazing. I see, I have a large, I think it's large, 250,000 in various platforms following on mostly on Twitter. I'm driving a large, fast-growing platform on LinkedIn, but Facebook is sort of my least favorite. That's your most favorite. But all in all, social media is in fact social, and I'm amazed at how many people don't treat it. It's, hey, I'm George, buy my stuff. And so it's really disappointing to get those things all the time. I would say 95% of what I get has this very awkward, approach. It's like me inviting a girl out and say, hey, let's kiss first, you know?
Exactly.
And it's so, wait a minute, why should I kiss you? So there's this building a trusted relationship before people even want to consider anything that you've got. So let's talk about the two pillars that were in the title. One is building a community. Talk about the context of what that means and why is that important. And the other piece is the assessment piece. So can you talk about those, describe them, and then talk about why they're important?
Absolutely. So community building has recently become even more important than it was in the past. It used to be that you opened your business or your book page or whatever it was, you went over and you opened a business page on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And because social media, and this is a very important point, social media is not yours. It belongs to the person who owns the platform, which means for Facebook, I may have several pages and communities, but they don't belong to me. They belong to Mark Zuckerberg. And at the end of the day, that's his monetization platform. So now all of a sudden business pages have become obsolete because he wants to monetize. And he's that, that's capitalism. So he has lowered visibility on those pages down to about 4 to 7% of the content that you produce, people actually see. So inside of a community, which is a group on Facebook, people see 100% of what's in there. So 100% of what you post to 100% of the people who are in that community. Now, where the assessment marketing comes in is that once you have a community, and this is kind of the old thinking of it, is that you build this community, you draw people in with Facebook ads, you draw people in, you actually just put people in to that group. And then you find out what they want afterwards. The way that we do it is completely different because we use the assessment marketing to make sure that we have our ideal client, our target market in that group. And that's how we use the assessment, is finding out what is it, where are their skill levels at? What kind of content do they need that will be valuable to them and create value? I'm creating value for them. What skill level are they at? We use micro commitments within those. So we find out, are we speaking to beginners? Are we speaking to seasoned experts who would like to, bump up where they're at in the world? So we use that assessment marketing to create the engagement within the group. What questions do we ask them? How do we keep this going? How do we, what kind of content do they need to begin building trust with me? So that's why we like to use those two together, to make sure that we have not just a big group of people in there, because I think that's all about ego, but the right people in there that we actually can serve.
Be careful of that ego thing. You got 3 males on the line here.
I don't get it. I don't get a flavor that you're really egocentric men.
Okay. Thank you. So let's frame this in a couple of subsections. So we're talking to charities who don't commonly publish a book, but let's rethink that. They really don't tell their story. So there's another whole track that maybe they haven't thought of, and they could even get a sponsor to put their name on it and pay for the whole thing. So there's that track. But there's also the track of building the platform so that we have people in community, which is people's together with a common philosophy, a common passion, things like that. So the community is where people actually relate to and talk to each other. And the most important thing, I believe, in the online community isn't content, it's relationship. Would you agree or disagree?
I think that's the most important thing, but content plays a big part of that, because in order to be able to show people your expertise, you need to be able to communicate value to them. And that's, I think, where the content really comes in. I like to liken it to when you have a book. There's that concept that most writers don't get, which is show, not tell. A community does the same thing through content. You're showing people that you are really an expert at what you do. You're showing them value instead of saying, oh, hey, me over here, I'm a great guru. Buy from me. So you are laying out the trust factor there. People are getting to know you. You're giving them actual actionable tips so that they see that you really know what you're doing, and you're creating that value from them. And when they're ready, the assessment marketing can drive them easily into a strategy session or more nurturing. So it's really sort of a nurturing sequence. I like to liken it to dating, sort of like you did. If I go out on a date with you and you say, first date, Juliet, will you marry me? It feels a little icky. Not that I would feel icky to you, but you get it. But I'm like looking around to see where the bathroom is and where that's positioned to the back door so I can call a cab and sneak out of there, because it was too much too soon and it feels really icky. So that's what all of this is about, is just that I'm showing you that I have value and nurturing you.
Well, and let's bring this back to these are really sound business principles for marketing. And this is an area that charities are blind to, marketing and creating relationships. And people who buy are donors, people who buy are sponsors, people who buy are grant makers, people who buy are board members who donate, but they give their time, people who buy are volunteers. And so we take it for granted that people just want to show up because we have a passion. And so being able to communicate a message, build a relationship, and show people why it's important, I think it's a missing skill set. What do you think about that repositioning of what you said?
I think it absolutely is as well. And a lot of people don't do it because it's time consuming. It takes a lot to communicate, to sit down and, write something up or do a video. So I think it's definitely something that's missing. The more that you can communicate with that crowd, the donor crowd, when you can show them video, when you can speak to, what the needs are, the better you're able to bring those people in. Because just you and me having a conversation, you may be passionate about it, but I'm going to forget about that passion 10 minutes later.
So the passion needs to be internalized with whoever we're talking to.
It needs to be presented in a way they'll remember. For some people, that's visual. For some people, that is, reading about it. But yes, something that they can go back and digest later as well. You mentioned a book. I actually did a really great book for called Blue Laguna for Project O, which is a nonprofit. And they sell that book, and it's something that you take home and you put it on your coffee table, and it's, you know, people join. We sold the book out because people were just so enthralled by, yes, I need to have that passion for cleaning up the ocean. Look at these beautiful animals. So, you know, things like that where people have a real takeaway and get a real sense of how far you're willing to go with your passion.
Well, I just know so many charities that have such good stories, and they never tell them except in little circles. And this whole idea of, why don't we do a book? And I'm sure you have ways to help people take the ideas and put them on paper. But I'm going to call on my colleague there in the pink shirt, the good-looking guy with he says the perfect head. I think I got hair, so we have to debate that. But I think it takes a real man to wear pink, don't you, Juliet?
I love it when men wear pink.
And we're of course recording this for the podcast, and people can't see us, but they can only imagine what Russell looks like wearing pink. So, Russell, you in a number of these sessions have made a really good point about when we're approaching board members or donors or sponsors to find out what they're interested in. So what kind of thread do you see in that coming from what Juliet's talking about in building the community, building a platform, and engaging people in a meaningful conversation?
Well, it's just like any verbal language. Everybody's got their language, and you pointed out those 5 personas that are actually customers of ours. And so in the material that I put together for people, I have a customer profile that just is turned up in both of my courses, but you have to have a separate one for each group that you're talking to. And we've got technology that we're beholden to. You need the technology, but the old relationship building process and skills are still relevant and still important. You have to take time to nurture these relationships on one hand. On the other hand, you've got to be where all the people that you want to reach are. So that kind of puts you in a space where you have to sort of embrace a little bit of everything. And that's what building the community is about. I talked with Rick Feeney, another publisher, at one point about having a nonprofit write a book, because it's something for them to tell their story with. But Juliet has actually worked with some nonprofits, and when you approach a nonprofit or you talk with an organization, what's the biggest hurdle that you've seen charities have to overcome to embrace this idea of building a community?
Oh, that's a great question. A lot of times it's the organization within the nonprofit. There's a lot of, well, who's going to run this? We're spread so thin. Do we really have time to do the assessments? Do we have the avenue? Do I feel comfortable? Who's going to go out there and ask somebody to go to, platformbuildingbizquiz.com or whatever yours is, and say, let's see how this serves you. Let's see where you're at with this. So there's just a lot of resistance behind who's going to do it mostly. When it comes to the book, we don't have money. We don't have money to invest in something like this. So or even marketing, a lot of times they don't have money to invest in marketing. It's usually 1 or 2 people who are really passionate about it, and they're out there trying to spend all their time raising money, and the administrative just isn't there to facilitate a lot of this. Would you guys agree?
Well, it's part of, we encourage people to move away, even though we call this the nonprofit exchange. It's sort of a channel that people understand. But we try to encourage people inside the organizations. So you picked up, Russell used the word charity. It's a tax-exempt charity, a social capital organization. We mistakenly go into this nonprofit as a philosophy and not a tax classification. So there is a resetting of your thinking. And a lot of organizations think they can't afford it when in fact they should afford it, because it'll make a huge difference in their outcomes. And also, I do think there's a channel here if they came up with a really good proposal for what they're doing, why it's important, and what the impact's going to be. I think they could find somebody to fund it for them, because they think about, we can only fund it out of our budget, instead of tapping into the people who are passionate about the mission and asking one of them to fund it, or a combination of them to fund it, or do a crowdfunding campaign around the initiative. Guys, David is joining us. David Dunworth, are you in Florida today, sir?
Yeah, I'm in Florida. I had to go to Chicago for a couple of days last week, but
Well, you came back to thaw out. So you and Russell, you're following this really neat thread, and coming from a extensive marketing background and knowing charities, what question do you have or comment you have for Juliet?
Well, I literally don't have any questions, but the comment on the book authorship is something that I've been talking with a couple of nonprofit people that I'm presently working with, that I think is one of the best vehicles to tell their story and unify their message, which not only works internally but externally as well. And I think it's a great, like you said, Juliet, the coffee table book, or or whatever you want to call it. It's the world's greatest business card. So I think that is an idea that really needs to propel itself forward. Great way to do things.
Yeah, and I didn't mention there, one of the things we did inside the book as well was we had QR codes in there. So you could actually take your phone and click on it and go to video, which I think was super powerful as well. I mean, the author of the book had GoPro video out in the middle of a pod of orcas that he was paddleboarding in, and blue whales and things like that just they were astounding. And I think that was a huge part of really bringing people in. His group has over I think last time I checked, over 1 million people over his business page over on Facebook, because people really grasp into what he was talking about with the ocean ecology.
It's fascinating to try to go backwards and figure out what makes something go viral like that and catch on in a big way. So Juliet, you spoke about you don't really own the community in Facebook. So why would you do Facebook rather than setting up your own independent community?
Well, and here's what we do with it is we really encourage that through the assessment marketing, before someone can get the results, they have to give you an email address so that they can get them. So one of the things that we do very well from past experience is we transition as soon as we can people from Facebook into our email list, because ultimately our email list is that tool that no one can take away from us. And I would imagine for charities, it's a huge way to build relationships with the donors as well. Look what we're doing, see how we're doing it. So that's one of the first things that we work on with the assessment, is being able to have people get it, take it before they come into the group. And it's criteria to get into the Facebook community. So we're immediately transitioning people so that we can contact them in the event that something does happen and Facebook goes away. All of that came from a really bad experience one of my friends had over on MySpace, where she had an online newsletter that got over 300,000 hits a month. And she was making money from sponsorships. And when MySpace went away, she didn't have a list. She lost all those people. So that's part of what we do with the Facebook community, is have that, that group of people there, but we also work very hard to get them into our list as well.
Mm-hmm. So when you're reaching out and creating a relationship with people, why Facebook instead of LinkedIn or Twitter?
So I've never really thought Twitter is a great relationship building tool. I kind of stay away from it. For me, it's like content curation instead of putting your own out there. And it's a little wild. It's a little like being on reality TV some days. So I stay away from Twitter. LinkedIn is primarily used, if you look at the statistics, people jump on, they stay on there for a few minutes, they look at what they need to look at, and they get off. Facebook is someplace where a lot of people go to relax. So, they're clicking around, they stay on it a lot longer. It's easier to build relationships and friendships over there than it is on those other platforms.
I find that people sorry?
It's more social.
Well, it is on social media. I find that people on Facebook are my B2B contacts, and they're serious about the conversations, and they're not looking at other things. They're looking for something meaningful. The most important relationships I have are people I met on Twitter, the highest level thought leaders. The editor of my magazine, for example, met him on Twitter. He's got a PhD in organizational leadership, and we've been working together for years, and we met just on Twitter, and he said, I'm going to come visit you. So we ultimately met in person. So I get a lot of traction on Twitter, and you're right. It can be like reality TV, and right now it's exploding. And there's this weird thing going on in especially Facebook and Twitter, in that they're censoring things and deleting accounts. Yeah, and I'll have, like, one day I'll wake up and there's 100 Twitter followers gone. It jumps around radically, and I can just only figure there weren't 100 people that got up and hated me one day. There's 100 people that lost their accounts, and I see a lot of censures. And I've read things. I don't know anybody that's lost a Facebook account, but I've read things about Facebook doing similar things. So to your point of making sure that you have something you own, where you've got those relationships, like an email list or whatever. So Russell, you're moving around there like you got a really good. Russell asked the really hard questions you haven't figured out yet. So Russell, what's brewing in that mind?
I was just thinking, maybe if I could put some tweets out there to convince people that I'm stable, my following would grow faster on Twitter. But
are you unstable? Unstable?
But basically, all those communities have a different audience and a different purpose. And I just jumped out there initially because I thought, well, I need to try to be everywhere and understand what these different platforms offer. So I try to post stuff in all of them. As far as engagement goes, I probably have a little bit more interactivity on LinkedIn just for myself. But what Juliet's talking about, and it's really important to understand where your tribe is.
Yes.
Because the people that you're trying to attract, if you've got a diverse group, age-wise, they're going to be all over the place. So you may need to spend a little bit of time using one platform more than the other. But the key is in your donor database, and that's those names and that information that you collect. How strong a case do you have to make to get people to actually endeavor to build the list? Because it's all, the money's in the list. If they can build a donor database, and how many people do you run across that don't actually have a list? And is it difficult really to make a case for them to do that?
That's a great question. We actually put polls inside of our community because we have a platform building community. And I do want to mention, in order to get into our community, you have to fill out an assessment and some questions because we don't take everyone. Okay. So you have to be our ideal client. And that is such a huge point, because if you've got a huge mishmash of people who aren't interested, you destroy the energy of your group. Okay. But getting people to build a list is very difficult. They don't, especially for book people, because making a bestseller list has become so difficult. You can't just have a bunch of sales on Amazon now. You need them over several platforms, which means you need to be talking to those people in your list before pre-sale and finding out where they read. So it's really hard to communicate that to people, that list is where all their money's at. And, if I send something out to my list, I know what percentage will open, and I pretty much can guess what percentage will purchase from there. And if you just have a group of, 1,300 people on Facebook, and you've got a small list, chances are they're not going to buy there. But if you have a large list, you can start looking at those analytics and figuring out how much you can actually bring in. So it's super important. And we actually do a list purge every year. We're about to get ready to do it now, where we say, hey, if you're not interested anymore, please unsubscribe yourself. And if we don't hear from you, we will unsubscribe you in 30 days. So we like to keep it super clean and make sure it's our ideal client. But it's difficult to communicate that to people.
I think one of the things that happens to people, I have an email box, I have several accounts. It's almost out of control. You go and get information, and there are some people that email you to buy things you've already purchased, or and that might be the experience of somebody. Maybe, are you running into people that say, I don't want to be that person that relentlessly emails 3 times a day, all day, every day? Is that a barrier to getting people to accept the idea of building a list?
It is, in some sense. We let people know when they opt in that we send out a piece of content a week. Unless we're running a campaign, we usually don't over email our list. Once a week is enough to say, hi, I'm here, I'm providing value, without being obnoxious. But you won't find with what we teach, we don't constantly hammer for sales. We're building trust and bringing people in through the assessments and actually talking to them one-on-one, which is the best way to build a relationship.
That's amazing.
Sorry.
No,
I was going to ask you to talk a little bit about the assessment process. And I think I've seen some platforms that talk about creating assessments, but what are some of the things that you typically want to put in there? How do you actually talk to people about how to tailor those, how to use them? How do you use them yourself? I know that you talked about making sure you only have the right people in the community. So what's the process for crafting the types of questions that are going to make sure you got the right people there?
Well, for us, first of all, we use what's called the Smart Biz Quiz, and I think it's the best tool out there because it does collect the email and it gives you a lot of information. And it also has a commitment section which puts together an autoresponder. So it has its own autoresponder with it. The process we usually go through is, what are the things that you need to know most about your consumer? So for you have 5 different consumers. You probably would have to go off in different directions with 5 different assessments. But for platform building, first we want to find out if they know who their audience is. So we go through that with them on a scale of 1 to 10. We ask a couple questions. What we find out a lot of times is that they don't even know who their ideal client is. So that may be something that you guys need as well. Then we jump into, what are your social media skills? Again, several questions. We usually try to keep it to 3 to 4 minutes worth of questions because we don't want people to go away because they're bogged down. From social media, we go into list building. And then our last section is usually about building a funnel, because we want to know, do you have a funnel built? Are we starting from scratch? From there, so it's basically, what do you need to know about your consumer, and what is it your consumer needs to know about themselves? Because when you're looking at that, I love Jane Duber, who created this system, positions it best, because she talks about taking the view off of you and putting it on them. Let's take the spotlight off me and put it on you and see where you are really at with all this. So the last part of it is a commitment section. And there you put your 3 biggest objections. And on a scale of 1 to 10, you ask people to, how do you, for me, it's time, money, and do I want to fix the problem? So we ask those questions, and then based on those answers, the autoresponder will put out an appropriate offer. So on a 1 to 30 scale in the commitment level, if you come in between 20 and 30, we want to talk to you. We offer you a free strategy session. If you come in between 10 and 20, we have a median range. We offer you an application. And if you fill out that application, then we want to talk to you. If you can't be bothered, you go back in the nurture pile. And then with the 0 to 10, we just give you something free because, you know, you're probably not willing to fix the problem. You're not willing to invest in yourself time or money wise. So that's what we look at, because we want to be talking to people who are ready to purchase today is really what we're doing. So we're delegating our time and we're keeping tabs on where people are at in the process. Did that make
Russell,
sense?
how do you see that applying to getting donors, getting board members, getting volunteers?
Well, that's a great system. I'd never heard anything, but as you can see, I was just kind of writing furiously. That's just brilliant. That's why I asked how you actually go about it. And that makes perfect sense because right now it's a numbers game. And you're better off spending time around the people that are more engaged than trying to convince people and make a case. There's already a tribe out there. Get to the tribe. Get to the people who are ready. They come glass in hand and they say, I want my portion of the Kool-Aid. And that's where they're plugged in. Other people you can kind of bring along, but because of the constraints on resources, nonprofit leaders just don't have that kind of time to chase people who may or may not have an affinity. So I think that's really great. So I'm gonna check out this Smart Biz Quiz tool. I looked at another one, and to be honest, I haven't gone back because they take something that's really simple and sort of make it sort of a process. So, but the important thing is to ask the best questions, and that's it's not the people that have all the answers, because the questions can change on you. So it's asking the best questions that position you to be more helpful to folks.
Juliet, are you familiar with the book by Ryan Levesque called Ask?
Yes, I am. And a lot of this is right out of this. What's interesting is before his book came out, I was already working with Jane Duber's tool because she created it before that book ever came out, I believe. And what she does is just brilliant with it. It's just, you're always going to have those looky-loos, but you don't want to spend time with those looky-loos. And I think this process really helps with that.
Looky-loos. So she's not talking about, oops, Russell's still writing. She's not talking about good-looking dudes like us, Russell. Looky-loos. So I'm coming up with a paradigm shift here. We chase people, we beg them to come on board, we tell them, oh, there's not much work, and they know we're lying. So turning the tables on this, we're looking for a few skilled volunteers. We're looking for a few committed board members. So Russell, we deal with this low performing culture. Charity leaders are reluctant to ask people to do things, when the data shows the more you ask of people, the more they're going to do, because they find a reason to do it, and it's connecting to their passion. So Russell, am I making sense? There's a paradigm shift here as we're saying we're building the board. Here's an assessment. We want to see, check to see if it's a good fit. What are you thinking about that?
Well, when people write you a check, or even more importantly, they've agreed to roll up their sleeves and spend some time with you, you've got them. They are committed to what you're doing. So asking a little bit more of them really just kind of honors their commitment. You know, if they have time constraints, they're going to be a little bit hesitant. So it makes sense to ask these people who are already supporting you to help ramp up those efforts. And who do you know? Who else do you know that can come in and contribute? Time, talent, or treasure.
That's right. So we have people that show up, and we really haven't segmented them. You know, these are the tactical people. Here's the visionary people. Here's the introverts. Here's the extroverts. Here's the people that like to do phone follow-up work. Here's people that hate to make phone calls. So sitting down there in Clearwater, Florida, David, anything come into your mind about how this assessment can help pre-qualify volunteers, board members, advisors, people like that?
Well, that's one of the primary methods is through Juliet's assessment process. You're funneling into the catch basins for where you want your clients to be. I mean, the people who are responding into that survey, you're being able to automatically segment them through that sophistication. I listened to a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and it was a marketing expert who was talking about how he restaffed his disc jockey wedding music business to the point where he utilized automation to hire people. And he did precisely what Juliet's just described, is take them through a series of assessments and exercises, first of all, to see if they can follow directions. And, it'd be surprising how many people will, read the email and respond when in the email says, just send me the highlights of your career, and somebody sends you the full resume. Well, things like that. So I see the value in that assessment filter system to utilize across the nonprofit, from board positions to volunteers. And those board members who are, and every organization has them. I sat on several boards, and a lot of people would talk to me and say, hey, how do you get on a board? How do you get on a board? I want to get on a board. Well, those are the people that you want to really stay away from, because they're looking more or less for something to hang on the far end of their name, as opposed to somebody who wants to share their passion and their gifts and their time with the mission that those things are, that the organization is based on. So yeah, I think that filter system sounds great.
Juliet, we've used the word funnel a few times, and there may be people listening that don't understand funnel. It kind of sounds like you're pouring them into a bottle or down the drain. So how are you meaning putting them into a funnel?
Well, it depends on which bucket they went into. Some of them we might pour down the drain.
Yes.
When I talk about a funnel, I mean actually having a marketing campaign set up. So bringing people in through, I actually use the funneling system, or the assessment and the community, as the head of my funnel. People that come into there, then we get them into our list. We also have, campaigns that are behind that. So it's just bringing them from social media, into our world, into social media, into our list, and then being able to sell them. So you're taking this big crowd, you're talking, it doesn't actually look like this on the inside. It looks more like a spider web when you do it right.
Uh-huh.
But taking that big group, let's say you speak in front of a room and you invite people to come over and take your assessment. So there's going to be a certain number of people in the room who will actually do that. The rest will go away. Then from that assessment, you're going to invite people into your community, and they're going to be people that took the assessment that may not want to be a part of your community. Then you get people inside your community and transition to the list, and not all of those people are going to go. But you're narrowing and narrowing down from a bigger group who, a little interest, more interest, a lot of interest, we're in. And that's what you're really doing with all that, is giving them baby steps and opportunities to come in. If they take them, great. If they don't, then let's get it down to those people who do want the opportunity.
Ryan Levesque makes a point in his book that people don't like to do surveys, but they like to give their opinion. What have you found? What have you found out?
The way ours is set up, you're not really giving an opinion. But I bet if you did this for something like politics, everybody has an opinion. So I think he's right in that sense. But here's the thing that entices them to take the assessment, is when you position it in a way to, let's find out where your skill level is really at. People are curious about that a lot of times. Like, I wonder if I am as good as I think I am. Or I wonder if I'm as bad as I think I am. So that's where the curiosity is really getting in and finding out more about the let's look at you instead of let's look at me. Because when you're down the line and you're selling something, it makes it much easier to sell whatever you're selling when their defenses are down. If I have to go into a strategy session and say, you know what, your social media isn't up to par, your social media may not be up to par, but your immediate reaction is, no, it's not. And that wall goes up, and it makes it more difficult for me to be able to close. When you're able to come into a webinar or a strategy session or a selling situation, and you already know that you need the help, you're much more open to the suggestion. You're much more open to me telling you that, you know, this is where you're at and this is where your vision is, and now let's fill that gap. So in a lot of ways, it has to be that curiosity about where they are as an individual on the topic.
Wow, there's a lot of nuances to this, and I've ignored the primary piece that you were talking about. Just thinking about how do we engage people as volunteers, board members, servant leaders in the organization. But there is one of the eight streams of revenue that we teach people how to create is earned income, and it is selling things that are related to what you're doing, books, selling events, doing trainings. There's business streams of earned income that are relevant to what the charity is doing. And so utilizing a lot of these, and then the whole idea of telling your story in a book, and maybe even having an anthology where you have a whole lot of your tribe write a chapter or tell the story, so that you've got an anthology which ups the investment. People are invested in the book, so they want to share it moreover. But so thinking about creating revenue streams by, you know, there's lots of books we can sell, there's lots of programs we could sell, we could even sign on for affiliate programs. So we teach charities to think about signing up at Walmart and get a number, so when people buy and give your number, Walmart takes a percentage and donates it to your charity. The grocery stores have the cards that they use to donate to charity. So repositioning, you know, we talked about how do we interview people for meaningful volunteer work, but going back to creating the book, creating the funnel. So where can people go to learn about what you do and how you teach? And do you have webinars or self-studies, or is it only working with Juliet?
Well, we've actually seen a shift in the marketplace where people aren't dying to work on self-studies anymore. So most of our programs are either one-on-one or group programs. The group program, I work one-on-one with you and we build your first assessment. We build your community. We build the editorial within it. We can go over to winsomemediagroup.com. There are a couple programs over there. The one where we actually build the community and the assessment is julietclark.com/RD as in dog, S as in Sam, M as in Mary. And Juliet is JULIET, Clark is CLARK. So julietclark.com/RDSM. You can find out more about that program.
RD, oops, can't type, SM.
RDSM. And we have a group over on Facebook, a platform building group over there. It's platform building. It's actually facebook.com/groups/platform builders.
Okay, builders on Facebook. So it's facebook.com/groups/platform builders. Michael Hyatt has a book called Platform.
He does.
And any similarities in what he teaches and what you're teaching?
I think if I had done the book back when he did, yes, there would be, but I think there's been so much change that's occurred between when he wrote his first book. I'd love to see him come out with a second book, an updated version. I think there's been such a shift in the marketplace that that book is very basic now. Our consumer's gotten much more savvy, and so I would love to see him write a more updated book in that sense. He's got the basics.
Yeah, and he's created, using that, he created quite a substantial tribe and a large footprint. So we're on the final stretch of our interview, and so I'm going to give Russell and David a chance to ask another question, and then I'll do a wrap with Juliet. So David, Russell, who wants to go first?
So
Well, thank you.
Russell first.
Okay, there's lots there for those that were wondering what we're talking about. The Ash Blueprint. I have not read the book yet, but I came across this. I'd forgotten that I downloaded it, and it's just got remarkable charts in here. But I'm going to go back and take it a step further because this is a wonderful value-added product that he just added and didn't charge any money for. So there's lots of information out there, but people don't need more information. They need somebody to help them make more sense of this. So Juliet, I'm going to go to your community and sign in, join, and learn a little bit more about how you employ these tools, because it's one thing to read it and another thing to see somebody actually take it and apply it. So remarkable stuff. I love this, and you can never learn too much, and it's really important. So the last question I have on getting nonprofits, or anybody in for that matter, because you probably deal with small businesses and other people too, what are probably the 3 most common objections you have to somebody embarking on the process?
Oh, that's so easy. Time. I don't have time to fix the problem because platform building takes time. I don't care what you see out there, 6 figures in 6 months, 100,000 in 90 days. It's a process. You don't build a relationship in 5 minutes, and you don't build a platform in 5 minutes. It is truly an integral process that takes, I would say, at least a good 6 months to a year when you build it organically. The second is money. There are a lot of books out there that tell people how to do it, and the biggest problem I see is that people are reading books, and by the time they read the books, the information's outdated. And now they're trying to bring outdated platform pieces together and integrate them. And probably the other objection is, I don't need to do it. I will be discovered. A lot of people think that it's as easy as, I'm just going to put my stuff out there and some influencer will discover me and I'll be on my way. And that's about as likely as the next supermodel being found at age 12 in a mall in Milwaukee.
So that's so real. As you know, entrepreneurs and most charities just think because they've got something worthy, people will beat a pathway to their door. And money will fall in their pockets, which is so far from true. There's a whole lot of ditches full of people who didn't make it. They fell off the road. Sir David in Clearwater.
I don't have any questions. I'm just sitting here aghast and amazed at the process. And like Russell, I'm heading over to your spot to see just how bad I am.
Well, how good you are. Position it nicely, position it positively.
Just trying to pick up on something that you said earlier in the day. So that was, yeah, you're right. I'm looking forward to finding out more about the process. Thank you.
Cool, thank you.
We got about 3 minutes left. So Juliet, I'm going to pause with a sponsor message and let you think about what's a closing tip or challenge or point or thought you'd like to leave people with. Our sponsor today is Rock Paper Simple. Rock Paper Simple does the branding, does the marketing, creates the web experience. They're the provider for HughBallou.com and CenterVisionLeadership.org, which is a online community, by the way, Juliet, which is in revision and will launch in February. So we have our own internal community with content, and we call it the Community for Community Builders. So I'm very fascinated by this conversation. So Rock Paper Simple, if you go to rockpapersimple.com/Hugh, you'll see offers for listeners of the podcast. So check them out. It's not just a pretty website. It's an engaged community, and it's a marketing tool, and it's an experience for your tribe. So try out Rock Paper Simple. So let's not make it complicated. Juliet, what would you like to leave people with?
Start building your community the minute you have the idea, whether it's a book, a product, service. Validate it there before you spend a whole lot of money finding out that it's not valid, that it doesn't have a market, that it doesn't have the purpose you think. And take all of that feedback that that community gives you and figure out a way to make it all work if it's a viable product. Don't do it the other way around.
Juliet Clark, thank you so much. This has been priceless information today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.